I never expected to see Elon Musk at the Hickory Creek Community Barbecue. Not here, in this sleepy town that most maps barely bother to mark. Hickory Creek was the kind of place where weekends meant fishing, church socials, and the occasional potluck. You might glimpse a pickup truck or two rattling past the dirt roads, but you'd be lucky if you ever caught a glimpse of anything more exciting than a stray dog chasing its tail or a kid with a slingshot. I'm Jenna Collins, a local middle school teacher who spent more years watching small-town life unfold than I care to count. My days consist of lesson plans, grading essays, and breaking up minor squabbles between 12-year-olds who think recess is some sacred, inviolable right. Sometimes I write articles for the county newsletter, mostly harmless stuff about the upcoming Harvest Festival or the high school football team's latest win. But even that is routine, predictable, safe. That Saturday was different. The sky was a soft pale blue, clouds floating lazily like cotton candy draped across the horizon. The air smelled faintly of charcoal and corn syrup from the grilling pits where neighbors flipped burgers and hot dogs. Children darted through the crowd, their laughter sharp and bright against the hum of low conversations. Music from a portable speaker played somewhere nearby. Classic rock covers, the kind of tunes that echoed the history of a town just like Hickory Creek. I stood near the community center, holding a paper plate with a half-eaten slice of pecan pie, trying not to let the sugar crash derail my focus. I was watching a cluster of older men discussing fishing spots when I noticed a black SUV turn down the dusty lane leading to the event. It was an out-of-place vehicle, too shiny, too new for this backwater gathering. The windows were tinted dark, shielding the occupants from the curious glances of the crowd. I shrugged it off as another outsider looking for a reason to poke around small-town life. But then, the door opened, and out stepped a man whose face I instantly recognized. Not just from countless magazine covers or news interviews, but from the endless memes and viral clips littering the internet. Elon Musk. The crowd didn't quite know what to make of him. Some stopped mid-conversation, their eyes flickering between disbelief and excitement. Others glanced nervously, unsure if they should approach or keep their distance. I felt a strange mix of skepticism and curiosity twist inside me. Elon Musk here? What on earth was he doing at a Hickory Creek barbecue? He wasn't the polished, laser-focused entrepreneur I'd seen on TV. No tailored suit, no hurried entourage. Instead, he wore a simple gray t-shirt and jeans, blending in like an awkward traveler trying not to draw attention. His eyes scanned the scene, not with the calculating intensity of a CEO plotting his next move, but with something quieter, maybe a hint of loneliness or wonder. I watched as a small boy, no older than 8, tugged on Elon's sleeve, asking if he was the space guy. Elon smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that softened the sharp angles of his face, and nodded. The boy's face lit up, and he ran off to tell his mother. Suddenly, an older man approached Elon with a shy grin, holding out a hand. "Welcome to Hickory Creek," he said. "Never thought I'd see you here." Elon shook the man's hand firmly. "Neither did I," he replied. His voice was lower than I expected, calm but carrying a trace of amusement. I wanted to get closer, to hear what he might say next. Was this some sort of publicity stunt? A bizarre detour in an otherwise tightly scripted life? Or something more? I shifted on my feet, debating whether to introduce myself. After all, I was a journalist, someone who made a living by capturing moments others missed. But I hesitated. Elon Musk wasn't just a public figure. He was a symbol, an enigma. What could I possibly add to the endless stream of narratives already swirling around him? As the afternoon wore on, Elon moved among the crowd, chatting with people, accepting invitations to try the homemade lemonade and sample the smoked ribs. He listened more than he talked, nodding thoughtfully at stories about the local fishing holes or the upcoming town elections. There was no rush, no pretense, just a man stepping outside the relentless spotlight of fame and letting himself simply be. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the field. The music shifted to a softer, more acoustic set as someone pulled out a guitar and started playing. That's when things took an unexpected turn. A woman near the stage, clearly recognizing Elon, called out, "Elon, come join us! Play us something!" Her voice held a daring edge, like she was challenging him to drop the mask and reveal a hidden side. The crowd murmured in agreement, eyes locking onto him, waiting. Elon paused, glanced around as if measuring the moment, then smiled with a mix of mischief and vulnerability I'd never seen before. Without a word, he stepped toward the stage. The guitar in his hands wasn't a prop. It was old, worn, with the kind of scratches that told stories of years of use. He settled onto a stool, fingers hesitating just a moment before finding the chords. Then he began to play. The music was raw and imperfect, but it carried a strange beauty. A song that spoke of dreams and doubts, of yearning and regret. His voice was soft, not the confident tone of a mogul addressing shareholders, but the gentle timbre of someone who had spent years hiding behind ambition. The crowd fell silent, caught in a moment that seemed to stretch and pause time itself. Here was a man known for rockets and electric cars, stripped down to something profoundly human. A man who, for a brief while, stopped being the headline and became simply a man with a song. I felt a lump rise in my throat, a sudden awareness of how little I really knew the people we elevate and idolize. Elon's melody was not just music, it was a bridge between worlds, a reminder that beneath the myths of success lie stories of struggle and longing, just like everyone else's. And in that unexpected moment, something shifted. The barbecue, the dusty roads, the ordinary lives all around us, they were woven together by a fragile thread of shared humanity. And for once, the billionaire was not a symbol of something distant and untouchable, but a neighbor, a fellow traveler on a path none of us could fully predict. I didn't know how the night would end. I didn't know if Elon Musk would stay long or slip away quietly. But I knew that this moment, this glimpse of the man beneath the public persona, was something I would carry with me forever. The guitar's last note hung in the humid air like a fragile whisper before the crowd exhaled softly, almost reverently. Elon's fingers lingered on the strings a moment longer. Then he set the instrument down carefully, as if it were something precious, fragile. The applause that followed was quiet at first, almost hesitant, before blossoming into a warm, genuine wave. No fanfare, no flashing cameras, just a slow, collective recognition that something rare had just happened. I took a step closer, my notebook forgotten in my pocket. I wanted to hear more from him, to see beyond the brief song, but I also didn't want to disrupt the fragile intimacy of the moment. People began gathering around him, some curious, others starstruck, and a few simply moved by the vulnerability that had cracked through his usual guarded exterior. I found myself caught in a swirl of emotions. For years, I'd watched the news, read the headlines, and listened to pundits dissect every tweet and launch. Elon Musk was the man who sent cars into space, the disruptor of entire industries, the enigmatic billionaire whose ambitions sometimes seemed larger than the planet itself. And yet here, in a place that felt like it'd been forgotten by time, he was just a man, trying to connect, maybe even trying to find something he had lost in the chase for greatness. The sun had dipped further below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The temperature cooled, and the faint scent of pine and earth mingled with the fading aroma of barbecue. I could hear the soft murmur of conversations, punctuated occasionally by laughter or the distant bark of a dog. Elon moved slowly through the crowd, accepting offers of homemade pie and lemonade, his smile never quite leaving his face. But there was a weariness in his eyes, a subtle shadow that told me this evening was not just about casual mingling. It felt like he was searching for something, maybe a respite, maybe a piece of himself he hadn't realized he missed. That's when I noticed the old man from earlier, the one who'd greeted Elon at the gate. His name was Frank, a retired schoolteacher and lifelong resident of Hickory Creek. Frank had approached Elon again, this time holding a small photo album. He flipped it open to reveal faded pictures of the town's early days, black and white snapshots of smiling faces, dusty streets, and community gatherings much like this one. "This place," Frank said softly, "hasn't changed much, but it's got a way of reminding us what really matters." Elon nodded, his gaze fixed on the images as if they held some secret message. "It's easy to forget what's important when you're always looking ahead," he murmured. Something about that moment struck me. Here was a man who had shaped the future with rockets and electric vehicles, suddenly humbled by the past, by the simple, unvarnished truths of a small town. I edged closer, my curiosity overcoming my hesitation. "Mr. Musk," I said quietly. He turned, his expression open, no hint of the usual guardedness. Yes? His voice was softer now, more human. I'm Jenna. I'm a teacher here. What brought you to Hickory Creek? He paused, as if weighing how much to share. I was invited, he said finally, a trace of a smile tugging at his lips. And I guess I needed to see something different, something real. There was honesty in his words that caught me off guard. I had expected a rehearsed answer, a deflection, or maybe a joke. Instead, I found myself nodding, understanding more than I thought I would. I know what you mean, I said, surprising even myself. Sometimes the noise of the world makes you forget the little things, the people, the stories. He smiled again, a genuine, unguarded expression. Exactly. The moment stretched between us, filled with the quiet hum of the gathering. Around us, neighbors chatted and children played, the ordinary rhythms of life unfolding with gentle certainty. Then, out of nowhere, a teenage girl stepped forward with a small, battered violin case. Mr. Musk, would you mind? She asked shyly, holding out the instrument. My dad's been teaching me, but I thought maybe you could try. Elon's eyes widened slightly in surprise, but he didn't hesitate. He accepted the violin, carefully opening the case. I watched his fingers as they adjusted the bow and found the strings, not with the practiced ease of a professional, but with a tentative curiosity. He drew the bow across the strings, and a raw, uneven note filled the air. The girl smiled encouragingly. It's been a long time, Elon admitted softly, almost to himself. I used to play when I was younger, but life gets complicated. I could see the struggle in his eyes, the tension between the public image of relentless achievement and the quiet yearning for something lost along the way. In that moment, the world seemed to fall away, leaving only the imperfect music and the fragile connection it forged between a billionaire and a small-town girl. The crowd gathered closer, drawn by the unexpected intimacy of the scene. Conversations hushed as Elon coaxed another note from the violin, this time a little steadier. The girl's eyes shone with wonder and hope, as if witnessing a miracle. I scribbled furiously in my notebook, not wanting to forget a single detail of this improbable evening. And all the while, I felt something shift inside me. A flicker of hope, a reminder that greatness isn't just about what you build or achieve, but about the moments when you let yourself be vulnerable, when you step out of the spotlight and simply connect. Elon Musk, the man who seemed destined to change the world, was here in Hickory Creek, not as a legend or an icon, but as a human being reaching out through music and memory. The violin's trembling notes wavered, and then grew steadier under Elon's tentative fingers. The soft scratch of bow against string drew a fragile melody through the cooling evening air, threading its way through the murmurs of the crowd. The girl beside him, Sarah, watched with wide, hopeful eyes, encouraging with a gentle nod each time he found a sound that pleased him. I leaned against the weathered fence bordering the park, my pen hovering over the notebook. It was strange, watching the man who so often seemed untouchable suddenly stumble through something as ordinary and as human as learning to play an instrument again. The spectacle of a billionaire experimenting with a violin on a rural stage might have been comical in other hands, but here it felt poignant, even sacred. Frank, the old teacher, stood nearby, his eyes glistening with something like pride. He's been through a lot, Frank murmured to no one in particular. Maybe he's just looking for a way to feel something real again. I glanced at Elon, watching his face closely, the furrowed brow, the slow, careful movements. This wasn't a show for the cameras, nor a PR stunt. This was a man who carried the weight of the world in his mind, peeling away his armor in front of strangers, letting his mistakes and humanity show. I remembered the countless headlines. Musk pushes boundaries, visionary disruptor changes industries, Elon Musk, genius or madman. The dichotomy had always fascinated me, but tonight I realized I'd never really seen the person behind the persona. Not truly. Do you miss it? I heard myself ask softly, stepping closer. Elon looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Miss what? He said, setting the violin down gently on a nearby bench. Music, playing, the things you loved before the world got so complicated. He paused, searching for words. I think sometimes when you're chasing progress, you forget the things that made you who you are. You think you can buy time back, but you can't. His gaze drifted upward, toward the stars beginning to pepper the twilight sky. The constellations were faint, but clear, like old friends watching silently. I felt a pang of empathy for him. Beneath all the headlines and achievements was a man who'd lost pieces of himself along the way. Maybe that was the cost of greatness, or maybe it was just the human condition. The crowd had begun to settle into small groups again, chatting quietly, the earlier excitement simmering into a warm, gentle glow. Children played near the picnic tables, their laughter like a balm for the world's sharp edges. Sarah tugged on Elon's sleeve. "Can you show me that song again?" she asked, eyes shining. Elon smiled, a genuine, quiet smile. "All right," he said, picking up the violin once more. As he played, something shifted inside me. The music wasn't perfect. Notes slipped and faltered, but it was real, raw, and honest. It was the sound of a man reconnecting with a part of himself he'd set aside for so long. I realized then that what I was witnessing was rare, a glimpse of a man stripped of his titles and achievements, vulnerable and unguarded. The mask of the public figure was gone, revealing the fragile, imperfect humanity beneath. It made me think about my own life, the roles I played, the walls I built, and the parts of myself I'd left unexplored. Maybe greatness wasn't about conquest or success, but about moments like this, when you dare to be seen as you really are. Elon's bow moved slowly now, drawing a gentle, wandering melody that seemed to hold a quiet apology to the night. The crowd listened in hushed awe, the ordinary evening transformed into something extraordinary. And for a moment, time seemed to pause. The violin song drifted away on the warm night air, and a hush fell over the crowd like a gentle tide washing over stones. Elon's fingers lingered on the strings, holding a note long after the bow had stopped moving, as if reluctant to let the moment end. Then, softly, he lowered the violin, the instrument now resting against his chest like a secret. The crowd remained still, caught in the fragile spell of shared quiet. I stayed rooted to my spot, heart pounding with a strange mixture of awe and disbelief. How had this happened? A man whose name was synonymous with cutting-edge technology, hyperspeed rockets, and headlines that dominated the news cycle had come here, to our small town's modest community event, and revealed a side of himself none of us had expected. Not the Tesla mogul or SpaceX visionary, but simply Elon Musk, a man reaching out for connection. Nearby, Frank smiled quietly, eyes crinkling at the corners. "You know," he said, nudging me gently, "sometimes it takes a place like this to remind a person what really matters." I nodded, suddenly aware of the warmth that had blossomed between strangers, the shared humanity that rose from the cracks in our daily lives. Then, to my surprise, Elon spoke, not to the crowd, but to me, directly. "You're a teacher?" he asked, his voice low and genuine. "Yes," I said, still catching my breath. "I teach middle school, mostly science." He nodded thoughtfully. "Science is like music, isn't it? Patterns, rhythms, the invisible threads that hold everything together." I smiled, intrigued by the connection he'd made. "I've never thought of it that way, but you're right. Both demand patience and curiosity." For a moment, the two of us stood quietly, the conversation as much about what was unsaid as what was spoken. Around us, the night deepened. The crowd began to disperse, neighbors exchanging hugs, promises to meet again soon. The old band packed away their instruments, laughter spilling from the folding chairs. Elon turned back toward the center of the gathering, his posture shifting, a trace of hesitation in his eyes. Then, unexpectedly, he raised his hands for silence. "I want to thank all of you," he said simply, "for welcoming me here, for sharing your stories and your kindness. It's been humbling." His gaze swept the crowd, no longer distant, but fully present. "Sometimes," he continued, "we get so caught up in our ambitions that we forget to pause, to listen, to connect. Tonight reminded me how important that is." The crowd responded with a soft murmur of agreement, touched by his words. I saw something new in Elon's expression, a vulnerability that no headline or speech could capture. The kind of vulnerability that comes from admitting you're human, flawed, and in need of others. And in that moment, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for this small town, for this unexpected encounter, and for the reminder that even the most extraordinary people carry ordinary hopes and fears. As the crowd began to break apart, I approached Elon once more, my notebook in hand. "Would you mind if I asked you a few questions? For a story?" He smiled, a quiet, almost shy smile. "Sure," he said, "but only if we keep it real." I laughed softly. "Deal." We settled on a nearby bench, the night wrapping around us like a soft blanket. And as the stars twinkled above, I realized that this story, the story of Elon Musk and Hickory Creek, was going to be unlike any I had ever written. Because it wasn't about rockets or electric cars or innovation. It was about humanity. The bench creaked slightly beneath us as we settled in. The hum of the departing crowd faded into the background, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant chirp of crickets. The night felt expansive and intimate at once, as if the world had contracted to this small, quiet corner and stretched open to hold the unspoken truths between us. I opened my notebook but found myself hesitating to write. How do you capture a man's essence when he's shedding the layers that define him publicly? How do you tell a story of a billionaire genius when he's just a man grappling with the same uncertainties and regrets as anyone else? Elon looked at me, patient and unassuming. Ask whatever you want, he said softly. I studied his face, illuminated by the faint glow of a street lamp. There was no hint of the confident CEO who commands boardrooms and press conferences, only a thoughtful, tired man whose eyes held shadows of doubt and longing. What brought you here tonight, really? I began. Not the invitation, but the part of you that said yes. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. I think I needed a break from the chaos, he admitted. From expectations, deadlines, the constant pressure to perform. Sometimes I wonder if I've lost touch with who I really am underneath all the titles and achievements. I nodded. It's hard to separate the person from the persona. Exactly, he said. People see the success, the companies, the headlines, but they don't see the loneliness, the moments when you question if it's all worth it. There was a vulnerability in his voice that caught me off guard. I realized then that this wasn't the Elon Musk the world had sculpted from news stories. It was a man wrestling with the same fears and hopes that shape us all. What about music? I asked, gesturing to the violin resting against the bench. Was that always a part of you? He smiled faintly. Music was my refuge when I was younger, a way to make sense of the world, to feel something beyond formulas and calculations. But as my responsibilities grew, I pushed it aside. Too busy, too distracted. And tonight? Tonight felt like a chance to reclaim a piece of that lost part, to remind myself that life isn't just about progress or profit. It's about connection, meaning, beauty. I felt a lump rise in my throat. Here was a man who could launch rockets and engineer electric cars, yet he sought the simple grace of a melody to touch his soul. Do you think you'll keep playing? I asked. He looked thoughtful. I want to. It feels grounding. A way to stay connected to the parts of myself I risk forgetting. We sat in silence for a moment, the night holding us in its quiet embrace. Then, unexpectedly, Elon looked up at the stars and said, Sometimes I think the hardest thing is to accept that you're not just what you do, but who you are when no one is watching. His words lingered between us like a fragile promise. I realized then that this story, the story I had come here to write, was no longer about a billionaire's latest venture or headline-making idea. It was about a man finding his way back to himself. And in that, I saw a truth far more powerful than any innovation. The night air had grown cooler, and the stars hung heavy and bright above the quiet town. The community event, once buzzing with lively chatter and laughter, had thinned almost to silence. Only a few clusters of people remained, savoring the last moments of unexpected togetherness. I glanced over at Elon, sitting beside me on the bench, the violin now resting peacefully between us. His shoulders seemed less burdened, though his gaze was distant, as if wrestling with thoughts too large to voice. Do you ever regret any of it? I asked quietly. The successes, the risks, the endless striving. He considered the question a long moment before answering. Regret is complicated. Sometimes I wonder if in trying to change the world, I've neglected the small parts of it that make life worth living. The relationships, the quiet joys. But without risk, there's no progress. It's a balance I'm still trying to find. I could hear the honesty in his voice, less polished than the speeches he gave or the statements he released. It was raw, vulnerable, real. Around us, the remaining crowd seemed to sense the shift. The buzz of casual conversations gave way to an almost reverential hush, as if the night itself was holding its breath, witnessing something rare and sacred. A young boy approached cautiously, holding a small notebook. Mr. Musk? He asked shyly. Elon smiled, patting the bench beside him. Yes? I like your music, the boy said, voice barely above a whisper. You're not just a rocket guy. Elon laughed softly, a sound full of warmth and surprise. Thank you. Maybe I'm a bit of everything. The boy sat down, his eyes shining with admiration and something deeper, a recognition of humanity behind the public figure. Nearby, I caught the eye of Sarah, the girl who had helped Elon with the violin earlier. She smiled shyly but confidently, as if seeing a side of him no one expected was a secret she shared. For a moment, I thought of the countless stories I'd written about great men and women, tales of triumph, scandal, innovation, but this story felt different. It wasn't about spectacle or drama. It was about the quiet moments that reveal the heart beneath the headline. Do you think this place, this night, changed you? I asked Elon. He looked at me, eyes clear and steady. It reminded me why I started dreaming in the first place. Not to be famous or wealthy, but to create a better world. And sometimes, to simply be human. The last embers of the night flickered away as we stood, the crowd slowly dispersing into the cool darkness. People lingered a moment longer, as if reluctant to let go of the fragile connection that had formed between a billionaire and a small town. As Elon turned to leave, he paused, looking back at the empty bench. Thank you, he said softly, almost to himself. And in those simple words, I heard a quiet grace. A man no longer defined solely by his achievements, but by his willingness to be vulnerable, to connect, to rediscover the humanity beneath. I closed my notebook, knowing this story would live with me forever. Not for the headlines it might make, but for the truth it had quietly uncovered. The dawn crept softly over Hickory Creek, painting the sky with gentle hues of pink and gold. The town, still wrapped in the quiet aftermath of the previous night, seemed different somehow, as if a subtle shift had taken root beneath its familiar surface. At the local diner, I sat nursing a cup of coffee, the weight of what I had witnessed still settling in my chest. Around me, the usual morning crowd exchanged hushed conversations, many centered on the unexpected guest who had walked among them the night before. Elon Musk, a name spoken with a mixture of disbelief and wonder. I leafed through my notebook again, searching for the right words to capture the fragile, fleeting magic of that evening. But no matter how many phrases I tried, the truth was simple and unvarnished. That night, a man who bore the weight of the world's expectations had let go, if only for a moment, and revealed the heart beneath. In the days that followed, stories spread beyond our small town. National headlines hinted at the unexpected appearance, but none could capture the quiet humanity of the moment. Yet for those of us who had been there, the teacher, the child, the neighbors who shared their stories, it was a turning point. I found myself reflecting on the contrast between the public Elon, the icon of innovation, relentless drive, and global ambition, and the private Elon I had seen, vulnerable and searching, a man who found solace in music and in moments of genuine connection. The community, too, seemed touched. Conversations lingered longer, smiles came easier, and a sense of shared possibility took root. It was as if the presence of someone so extraordinary, stripped of pretense, had reminded us all that greatness isn't just about what you achieve, but about how you show up, as imperfect, striving humans seeking connection. A week later, I received an unexpected message, a simple note from Elon himself. It read, "Thank you for seeing me, not the headlines, but the person. That night reminded me what matters most. I hope we all keep remembering to listen, to feel, to be present." I folded the note carefully and placed it in my journal. Sometimes I thought, the greatest stories aren't the ones written for the world. They're the ones that change us quietly from within. As I looked out the window at the waking town, I felt a quiet hope. That beneath the masks we wear, beneath the roles we play, there is a shared humanity waiting to be seen. And that when we dare to be vulnerable, to reach across the distance between us, we find a grace that transcends all titles and achievements. Elon Musk had come to Hickory Creek uninvited, unexpected, a reminder that even the most brilliant minds carry fragile hearts. And in that unexpected encounter, we all found something rare, a moment of truth, a pause in time, and a glimpse of the man beneath.